Daughter called me 3 times in 20 minutes. I was sitting in my sister's kitchen in Savannah, Georgia, eating a bowl of grits I hadn't touched since my last visit 2 years ago, and my phone kept buzzing against the table like something was wrong. I knew before I even picked it up. A father always knows. Dad. Her voice was tight, not scared exactly, more like she was trying not to be. He's at the storage unit. He drove out there this morning. I don't know how he found the address. I set down my spoon. Which storage unit? I asked, even though I knew. There's only one that matters. The one on Route 9. Dad, he had a crowbar in his truck. I thanked my sister for breakfast, told her I'd explain later, and walked out to my rental car in the driveway. It was early November, cold for Georgia, and the sky was that flat grey colour that makes everything look like an old photograph. I sat behind the wheel for a moment, and I thought about a man I'd never liked, driving 40 minutes out of the city at 7 in the morning with a crowbar, convinced he was about to find something that would change his life. I thought about how long I'd been waiting for exactly this. I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this. I am not a dramatic man. I spent 31 years as an engineer at a water utility company in Charlotte, North Carolina. I raised 2 children after my wife passed, my son Nathan and my daughter Adele. And I did it quietly, without much fanfare, the way my own father raised me. I am not the kind of person who makes plans to catch people. I'm the kind of person who watches and waits and prepares. There is a difference. Adele met Preston 2.5 years before any of this happened. She was 34, working as a speech therapist at a pediatric clinic, living in a nice apartment in the south end of Charlotte. She'd dated before, seriously, a couple of times, but nothing had stuck. She called me one Sunday afternoon and said, "Dad, I think I met someone. I want you to meet him." I met him the following weekend. We had dinner at a restaurant near her apartment, the 4 of us, me, Adele, Preston, and Nathan, who drove down from Raleigh because he wanted to get a look at this man too. Preston was 40, well-dressed, worked in commercial real estate, had a handshake that was maybe a little too firm. He laughed at the right times and asked me the right questions about my career and said yes sir twice, which a lot of men his age have stopped doing. Adele looked at him like he'd hung the moon. Nathan looked at him like he was trying to figure out what was wrong. "What do you think?" I asked Nathan in the parking lot while Adele and Preston were getting her coat. Nathan shrugged. "I don't know, Dad. Something feels off. I can't tell you what it is." I couldn't tell either. Not yet, but I filed it away. Here is what I knew about myself going into that period. I had done well. Not spectacularly, not by any magazine standard, but well. The house I'd owned for 27 years in a quiet neighborhood in Charlotte was paid off. I had retirement accounts, some investments I'd made carefully over the decades, and a storage unit on Route 9 that I'd had since 1987. The same year my wife and I moved to North Carolina. My net worth, if you sat down and added everything up, was not a number I advertised. I'm from a generation where you don't talk about money. You just take care of it. Preston, I came to understand, was very interested in money. It started small. 3 months in, he made a comment at dinner about the value of the house. Not rude exactly, more like he was impressed. "This neighborhood's really come up, hasn't it? You're sitting on a nice asset, Edmund." "My name is not Edmund. My name is Walter." I corrected him and he apologized, and I thought, that's strange. A man who's courting your daughter should know your name. 6 months in, Adele mentioned that Preston had asked her about my retirement situation. Whether I planned to downsize. Whether the house would stay in the family. "Why is he asking that?" I said. "He's just interested," she said. "He works in real estate, Dad. It's how his brain works." I let it go. But I started paying closer attention. 9 months in, Adele told me they were getting serious. She was glowing when she said it. She used the word forever, and she meant it with everything she had. And I looked at my daughter, who'd spent 3 years of her life sitting at her mother's bedside, who'd driven 2 hours every weekend without being asked, who deserved every good thing this world had to offer, and I made a decision. I called my attorney the next morning. I'd already updated my estate plan years earlier after my wife passed, but now I had it restructured entirely. The house went into a revocable living trust. My investment accounts had designated beneficiaries that bypassed probate. I had a frank conversation with my attorney about what I wanted to happen if something happened to me, and more importantly, I had a conversation about what I did not want to happen. Then I mentioned, casually, to Adele that I kept the important documents in my storage unit on Route 9, my financial records, the original deed to the house, my wife's jewelry, which I'd been meaning to pass on someday, the kind of thing a man accumulates over a lifetime. This was true, partially. There were documents in that unit, but the jewelry had been in a bank safe deposit box for 11 years, and the accounts, the trust documents, the real assets, those lived with my attorney and in a fireproof safe in my bedroom that was bolted to the floor and that nobody in the world knew about except Nathan. I want to be honest with you. I wasn't certain Preston was dishonest. I was watching. That is all I was doing. A man who's worked his whole life for what he has doesn't apologize for watching. Adele and Preston got engaged in January. She called me first, before she called Nathan, before she called her best friend, and her voice was like a little girl's on Christmas morning. I told her I was happy for her. I meant it. I wanted her to be happy. I just wasn't sure yet whether Preston was the vehicle for that happiness or something else entirely. The engagement party was at my house. 40 people in my living room, catering, the good china out for the first time in years. Preston's parents came down from Richmond, pleasant people, his father a retired pharmacist, his mother a former school teacher. Good people, I thought. Doesn't tell you much about the son, but good people. At some point that evening I found Preston standing in my hallway, looking at the framed photographs on the wall. He'd had 2 glasses of whiskey and he was relaxed, and he said without really thinking, "This house must be worth close to $1 million in today's market." I said, "I wouldn't know. I don't plan on selling it." He smiled. "Of course not. But it's good to know what you have." I thought about that sentence for a long time afterward. It's good to know what you have. He wasn't talking about sentimental value. He wasn't talking about a home where my children grew up and my wife spent the last good years of her life. He was talking about a number. The wedding was the following September. Nice ceremony, outdoor venue outside Charlotte, 200 people, my daughter looked like her mother, and I cried in a way I don't usually permit myself. Nathan gave a toast that made everyone laugh. I danced with Adele to the song she and her mother used to sing on road trips when she was small, and for a few minutes I stopped thinking about any of it, and I was just a father watching his daughter start her life. Then the honeymoon ended, and the questions started. It was so gradual that I almost missed it. At first, it was Preston suggesting that Adele's name should be on my accounts. Just in case something happens to you, Walter, you don't want things tied up in court. Then it was whether I'd thought about moving somewhere smaller and maybe a retirement community. He knew of a beautiful one outside Asheville that wouldn't cost me much. Then one Sunday he drove out to look at the storage facility. He said he was in the area for a client and just happened to see it, and he texted Adele asking if I'd ever thought about consolidating. Adele told me about the text because she thought it was sweet that he was looking out for me. I did not tell her what I thought. What I thought was, he's been researching, a man who works in commercial real estate, who just happened to drive 40 minutes out of the city to a facility in an area where he had no clients, does not do that by accident. He was looking. Nathan came to visit me that Thanksgiving, and I sat him down after Adele and Preston left, and I told him everything I'd been noticing. Nathan listened without interrupting, which he's been able to do since he was a boy. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "So what are you going to do?" "I've already done it," I said. I explained the trust. I explained the safe. I explained that the storage unit had my old tax returns, some furniture from when the kids were small, and a box of Christmas decorations that hadn't been opened since 2008. I explained that I had told Adele in passing twice that the storage unit was where I kept the important things, the documents, the jewelry, the financial records. Nathan looked at me for a long time. "You baited him," he said. "I prepared," I said. "There's a difference." Over the following months, Preston's behaviour shifted in a way I can only describe as hunger becoming impatience. He started pushing Adele about their finances more aggressively. Why were they renting when they could own? Why wasn't she asking me for help with a down payment? Didn't I want to see them settled? Adele started looking strained when she called me. She laughed a little less. She mentioned once that Preston had suggested she ask me to add her as a beneficiary on something. He said it would just make sense, she told me. What do you think? I asked her. Silence. Then, I don't know, Dad. It felt like he was asking me to ask you. Like it wasn't really my idea. That was the moment. Not the crowbar on Route 9. Not the texts. Not the engagement party comment. That was the moment I knew my daughter was starting to see it herself. 3 weeks later, a Tuesday morning in November, my phone rang at 7:15 while I was eating breakfast in my sister's kitchen in Savannah. I'd come down for a long weekend, the way I do every year before the holidays. I was not worried. I had been waiting, and I was ready, and there was nothing in that storage unit that could hurt me or my family. Dad. Adele's voice tight and controlled. He's at the storage unit. He drove out there this morning. I don't know how he found the address. I know how he found it, address. I know how he found it, I said. I mentioned it to you enough times. He had a crowbar, Dad. What is he expecting to find? She was quiet for a moment. He thinks the jewelry is there. He thinks the accounts are there. He's been talking about it. I didn't realize until last night. He's been building up to this. He told me he was going out for a run. I asked her where she was. She was at home, at the apartment. I asked her if she was all right. She said she thought so. I told her to call the storage facility's security line. The number was on the rental agreement she'd seen me file once 2 years ago, and to report an attempted break-in. I told her to call Nathan. Then I told her to sit down and drink some water and let me handle the rest. What happened at the storage unit? Preston had arrived at 6:45. The facility opens at 7. He waited in the parking lot, and when the gate opened, he drove straight to Unit 114. He tried the combination lock first, which of course he couldn't open because he didn't have the combination. Then he took the crowbar out of his truck. He didn't get far. The facility manager was making rounds and saw him, confronted him. Preston claimed to be my son-in-law doing a favor for me. The manager asked him to show identification and to call me directly. Preston called Adele instead, which was the wrong call, and by the time security at the facility had him talking in the parking lot, Adele had already called the non-emergency police line and reported the attempted break-in. I want to tell you what was inside Unit 114, because this matters. A leather armchair that belonged to my father-in-law. My son's old bicycle, the one with the training wheels still attached, that I could never bring myself to throw away. 4 boxes of old tax returns. Nothing after 2015. Nothing you'd find useful. A box of Christmas ornaments. The glass ones my wife collected from antique stores every year. And in a manila envelope in one of the tax boxes, a handwritten note from me to Adele and Nathan that said, "If you're reading this after I'm gone, know that everything you need is with Robert Chen at Chen & Associates in Charlotte. He has the trust documents, the access instructions, and a letter from me. The rest of what matters is in this room with you right now. The chair, the bike, your mother's ornaments. That's what I wanted you to have. I put that letter there a year before all of this happened, not because I expected Preston to find it. Because I wanted my children to find it someday and understand that the things I valued most were not the things he was looking for." I flew back to Charlotte 2 days later. I had already spoken with my attorney. The note from Adele's call, her own description of what Preston had said the night before about finally finding out what her father was worth, had been carefully documented. The police report from the facility had been filed. Adele met me at the house, alone. Preston had gone to stay with a friend, which I suspect was less his idea than the natural result of what had happened. She sat across from me in the living room where she'd grown up, and she looked tired in a way that made her look older than she was, and she said, "Dad, how long have you known?" "I suspected for a long time," I said. "I knew for certain about 3 weeks ago. When you told me that asking about the beneficiary didn't feel like your idea," she nodded slowly. "He asked me, the first week we were dating, whether you owned your house outright. I thought he was just making conversation." She stopped. "I was 34, Dad." I wanted to believe it. I know, I said. That's not on you. I feel stupid. You're not stupid, you're trusting. Those are very different things. She filed for divorce the following month. It was not without pain. She had loved him genuinely, whatever his reasons for being there. And love doesn't just switch off because someone turned out to be something other than what you thought. There were hard months. There were phone calls where she didn't say much and neither did I, and we just stayed on the line together. But I watched my daughter come back to herself. It happened slowly, the way recovery from anything real happens, not in one moment, but in dozens of small ones. The Sunday she laughed at something Nathan said for the first time in months. The afternoon she repainted her living room a colour she'd always wanted and sent me a photograph without commentary. The morning she called me to say she picked up an extra patient and was enjoying her work again. Preston left the divorce with what he came in with, because he came in with nothing, and the prenuptial agreement I'd quietly encouraged Adele to think about 6 months before the wedding, which she'd thought was just her father being overly cautious, made sure of it. He fought it briefly through an attorney and then stopped. I don't know where he is now, and I don't need to. The storage unit is still there on Route 9. I kept it. I go out there twice a year to check on the armchair and the ornaments and the bicycle. And sometimes I sit in the armchair for a little while in that quiet space that smells like dust and old wood. And I think about my wife, and about time, and about what a man actually accumulates over the course of a life if he's paying attention. Last Christmas, Adele came over, and we decorated the tree together with her mother's glass ornaments, the ones from the box. Nathan drove down from Raleigh and we ate dinner and played cards and stayed up too late, the three of us, the way we did when the kids were small. Nobody mentioned Preston. Nobody needed to. At the end of the night, after Nathan had fallen asleep in the guest room and Adele was getting her coat, she stopped in the hallway by the photographs and she looked at them for a long moment. Her mother young, herself as a baby, Nathan in his Little League uniform, and she said, "Dad, what is in that storage unit?" "Really?" I smiled. "Your grandfather's chair," I said. "Nathan's old bike. Your mother's Christmas ornaments." She looked at me. "That's it?" "That's everything," I said. She thought about that, and then she laughed, a real laugh, full and surprised. And she hugged me in the hallway the way she used to when she was 12 years old, and something had been bothering her, and she finally let it go. And I held on, the way a father does, for as long as she needed. What Preston was looking for was never in that unit. It never existed in the form he imagined it. A man who spends his life chasing what other people have built tends to miss the thing that was actually being protected, which was never the accounts, or the house, or the jewelry. It was her. It was always just her. I still go out to that storage unit twice a year. I unlock the door, pull the chain on the overhead light, and sit in my father-in-law's old leather armchair for a little while. Just sit. The place smells like dust and cedar, and something I can't name. Time, maybe. Or the particular quiet that settles around things that have been kept safe for a long time. And I think about what it means to actually protect someone you love. Preston thought he was chasing a fortune. What he was really chasing was a version of my life that existed only in his imagination. The accounts, the deed, the jewelry, the number. He spent 2 years building toward a moment that turned out to be an armchair and some Christmas ornaments. And I'd thought about why a man ends up there, standing in a storage facility parking lot with a crowbar at 7 in the morning, and what I keep coming back to is this. He never developed the one thing that would have made any of it unnecessary. He never learned to build something of his own. Not because he lacked the intelligence. He was sharp, I'll give him that. But intelligence without integrity is just a faster way to rationalize what you already wanted to do. He could see the angles. He just couldn't see the wrong in it. That's the part that takes real work, knowing the difference between what you can do and what you should do. I watched my own father navigate that his whole life, a man who worked 30 years at a textile mill, never made much, never complained about it, and left behind children who knew exactly who he was. There was no mystery about his character. That consistency, that quiet reliability is something I tried to carry forward. Not perfectly, but I tried. And then there's the other thing, the part nobody talks about enough, which is that preparation is not paranoia. When I restructured my estate plan, when I had those conversations with my attorney, when I quietly suggested to Adele that a prenuptial agreement was worth considering, I wasn't being cold or transactional. I was doing what a person does when they refuse to be naive about the world while still choosing to love people fully. Those two things are not in conflict. You can love your daughter completely and still make sure that love isn't used as a door someone walks through to take from her. Adele didn't fall apart. That matters to me more than anything else about this story. She saw clearly, she made a hard decision, and she came back to herself. That kind of resilience. The ability to absorb a genuine loss, grieve it honestly, and keep going anyway. That isn't something you're born with. It's something you'll practice, usually without knowing you're practicing it. She practiced it for years when her mother was sick. She had more in her than she knew. What I want, if anything useful comes from telling this story, is for someone to think about what they're actually building. Not the accounts, not the property, not the assets, though those matter and you should protect them. I mean the other thing, the part that doesn't go in a storage unit, the kind of person you're becoming, quietly, in the daily choices nobody else sees. That's the only thing that compounds in a way that actually lasts. Preston left with nothing because there was nothing there for him to take. That's not luck. That's 30 years of Tuesday mornings,